First performance, 21. His words hung in silence. The sleepers looked at Sonny with a hilarious assortment of emotions, ranging from bewilderment to shock. The young man with humorous eyes just smiled politely. To be honest, getting an ascended aspect during the first nightmare was extremely rare. He was certainly someone special, maybe even outstanding. Actually, despite their apparent differences, the young man somehow reminded Sonny of Hero, Oro of the Nine. There was a special type of calculating coldness hidden inside their eyes. He had encountered such people before, mostly among the veterans of various street gangs in the outskirts. They simply called this type of coldness murder math. Basically, it was a habit experienced fighters developed, no matter where they were and what mood they were in. There was always a sober part of their minds, constantly calculating the most efficient way of killing the person in front of them, just in case such need arises. Why do I have to antagonize someone like that of all people? But Sonny really had no grounds to complain. After all, he brought this on himself. After a few seconds, one of the young man's companions finally blinked and said, Friend, you must not know a lot about the spell. Casters. Results are truly remarkable." Then, with a furtive glance at the remarkable caster, he added, "He is a legacy, after all. An actual, living and breathing descendant of an awakened clan." Sonny reevaluated his opinion of the humorous young man. Legacies were known to be trained for their eventual entrance into the spell from the moment they could walk. For them, being infected was a certainty instead of a possibility. They were extremely formidable people. Just great, he thought bitterly and made his frown deepen. "Are you trying to pull a prank on me? You call this remarkable?" The bewilderment in the eyes of these sleepers was slowly being replaced by hostility. "Listen, friend, if you don't think that an ascended aspect is remarkable, then please share with us your own amazing results. What, pray tell, was your appraisal?" Castor himself was still keeping quiet and smiling. However, his defenders were growing restless. This was exactly what Sonny wanted to happen. He smiled with utter contempt. "I would let you know my appraisal was, it was glorious, yes, glorious. And the aspect I acquired was of the divine rank." After that, he received a number of strange looks. No one had ever received a divine aspect before, so of course they were starting to think that he was a lunatic. But there was still a sliver of doubt. Maybe that strange guy was a descendant of a powerful clan, peerless prodigy. Maybe his appraisal was indeed glorious. Sonny had to dispel that tiny bit of doubt. "Mind you, I'm not some lofty legacy. I'm from the outskirts. I've never even received combat training. All that training. And he only got an excellent. What did he do during the nightmare? Pick his nose the whole time." The expressions of all the sleepers that were listening to his bragging instantly changed. An outskirt rat with no training, yeah. Sure, who was he trying to fool? Finally, with the same polite smile, Castor spoke. "Glorious, that is interesting. Would you mind telling us what were your achievements in the nightmare?" Sonny grinned. "Sure, no problem. First of all, I killed an awakened tyrant. Every cost him a couple of moments of intense pain, but he didn't let it show on his face. His expression was nothing but smug and confrontational. The mere mention of a tyrant, let alone an awakened one, made a couple of sleepers smile with ridicule. "Oh, really? How did you kill it?" An arrogant look appeared on Sonny's face. "How? Let me tell you, I didn't even have to lift a finger. I just spat and it was torn to pieces." Which was true. Sonny had spat a mouthful of blood on the altar, and as the result, Mountain King was ruthlessly dismembered by Shadow God. Someone openly laughed. "This guy is either insane or purposefully messing with us. Listen here, Shorty, have some decency, okay? Who would believe such a lie?" Sonny was genuinely angry. He wanted to retort, saying that he wasn't short, but he couldn't because that would be a lie, damn it. So instead, he just gritted his teeth and said with a voice full of outrage, "I can't answer that because it's not a lie. Are you really insisting that you had killed an awakened tyrant, a tyrant, and with a bit of spit, no less?" Sonny knitted his brows. "That's the truth." More laughter followed. "Crazy bastard. He actually believes in his own crap. Insane, he's insane." Unexpectedly, Castor stopped his companions. "Guys," after the laughter quieted down, he asked in a friendly manner, "what else did you achieve?" "What, that wasn't enough?" Sonny raised his chin. "Let me think. Oh, I also killed an awakened swordsman." "Really? How did you do that?" Acting as though he was a little bit embarrassed, Sonny looked down. Actually, that time I had to lift a finger. I even had to Shake it a couple of times. That was enough to kill him, though. He was holding the silver bell between his fingers, which led to Hero being attacked and eventually killed by the tyrant. So, technically all his statements were true. What a crackpot. Ha, can you believe this idiot? Poor bastard, not only is he weak, he's also lost it. Castor gave his companions a long look and then turned to Sonny. Anything else? Sonny blinked. Time for the finishing touch. Something else? Oh right, I communicated with a bunch of gods even though they were all dead. I made one of them. Wake up, he gave me a blessing. I was blessed by a god, do you all understand? The sleepers were silently shaking their heads or looking at him with pity. Castor sighed. I see. Well, in comparison to your achievements, mine do look rather average. Thank you for sharing with us. I hope you'll be as successful once we enter the dream realm. Sonny smiled with a look of smug superiority on his face. You better believe it. With that, he turned around and walked away. Ah, that's a job well done. He was pretty sure that after this performance, no one would ever believe that he actually had some kind of a powerful aspect, or did anything worthy of notice during the nightmare. He only told them the truth and yet managed to make everyone believe in the opposite of the truth. Such an incredible feeling. What did they think of him now? They thought that he was weak, grew up without any education in the outskirts, and had no training. More than that, he was apparently either insane or incredibly stupid. His temper was terrible, truly pathetic and pitiful fellow. Now, whenever he was asked about his aspect, he could just honestly say that it was of the divine rank and be laughed at. People would rather believe that the spell had ceased to exist than that he was someone noteworthy. He could even scream about his accomplishments from the roof, and no one would believe him. Subsequently, no one would ever suspect that he had a true name. Just you wait, fools. One day I'll be the one laughing. As Sonny was walking away, he heard one of the sleepers talking to Castor. Why didn't you put that lunatic in his place? He has belittled you. After a short pause, Castor answered. His voice sounded low and mellow. Poor kid must have lost his mind in the nightmare. It often happens. He'll most likely die soon, so being kind is the least I can do. The corner of Sonny's mouth twitched. What a nice guy. He knew that Castor's words were based on a false assumption, but for some reason still felt a cold chill running up his spine. Corpse Corner, 22. Satisfied with his performance, Sonny walked back to the deserted corner of the hall. He felt people looking at him with mockery, contempt, and pity. No one seemed to be willing to stay close to him. It was just as well. He didn't want to be bothered anyway. Still, weren't their reactions a bit exaggerated? It's not like he was carrying an infectious disease. Well, except for the spell. But it wasn't really a disease, which everyone here should have known already. Finally, he extricated himself from the crowd and reached the corner. For some reason, sleepers were unwilling to approach it. Currently, there was only one girl sitting quietly on the bench. Sonny gave her a look. The quiet girl was delicate, demure, and very pretty. Her clothes were tidy and neat. They weren't very expensive, but still rather tasteful. With her pale blonde hair, big blue eyes, and exquisite face, she looked like a beautiful porcelain doll. She was subtly breathtaking. However, there was something wrong with her. Sonny frowned, trying to understand what exactly about the girl made him uncomfortable. After a while, he realized that her empty, expressionless stare was reminding him of Mountain King. Startled, Sonny understood that the girl was blind. It took him a couple of seconds to compose himself. What a shame. A bit disheartened, he carefully sat on the opposite end of the bench. The girl wouldn't have survived the first nightmare if she had been blind prior to entering the spell, which meant that she lost her sight as the result of the appraisal. It was her flaw. Suddenly, Sonny felt very apprehensive. A cold sensation spread through his chest, and I thought my flaw was bad. No matter what aspect ability the blind girl had received in exchange for her sight, it was effectively a death sentence. A blind person had no chances of surviving in the dream realm, at least not with a dormant core. In some sense, the girl was already dead. She was effectively a walking corpse. Feeling extremely disturbed, Sonny turned away and studied the crowd of sleepers. Now he understood why people were trying to avoid this corner. The girl was surrounded by an invisible but almost palpable aura of death. Sleepers usually weren't very superstitious, but anyone would feel uncomfortable in her company. Armed with this knowledge, Sonny suddenly saw a pattern. How the young people in the hall were grouped. Instinctively, they all tried to stand close to those of their own circumstance. At the far end of the hall, closest to the stage, were one or two small groups. People in these groups were distinct from the rest of sleepers. They were all confident, calm, and had an air of readiness. These were the legacies. They were trained for the spell since birth, and had the highest chances of survival. Castor especially stood out from the rest. Next to them was a larger number of expensively dressed young people. They were lively and excited, and only a little nervous. They were the scions of rich and high-ranking citizens. Their training was pretty good since such families had ample funds to hire private tutors, even awakened ones. Their chances of survival weren't bad. Then there was the largest part of the crowd, which consisted of kids from middle-class families. They might not have had the privilege of training under awakened tutors, but their education wasn't bad. The government spent a lot of effort to put all the necessary knowledge and skills into the school curriculum, preparing potential sleepers in advance. Some of them might have received additional training in private. To survive, these sleepers would need to put in a valiant effort and also have a bit of luck, but it wasn't improbable. Consequently, they were tense and nervous. And lastly, there was Sunny and the blind girl, the corpses. From the point of view of other sleepers in the hall, their chances of survival were close to zero. How charming. This was how the young sleepers had subconsciously divided themselves. The only exception from this rule was the silver-haired girl who stood alone and apart from everyone, seemingly indifferent to tension and nervousness that permeated the air. She was leaning against a wall with her eyes closed, still listening to music. But regardless of their group and level of training, everyone was already tired of waiting. When will the damn induction ceremony start? Sunny thought. Irritated, as though answering his thoughts, a tall man in a dark blue uniform appeared on the stage. Not only was he tall, he was actually almost a giant. Sunny even wondered if the man's mother had sinned with a bear. Of course, it was impossible. Bears had gone extinct long before the spell even appeared. But he once saw pictures in a book, and they looked sort of similar. A bear-like nightmare creature then. The giant man had wide shoulders, an athletic build, and a gorgeous brown beard. His eyes were calm and serious. After reaching the center of the stage, he gave sleepers a long look. When his gaze reached the deserted corner, Sunny suddenly felt nervous. I sure hope he doesn't have a telepathic ability. Otherwise, he might separate me from a limb or two on behalf of his mother. The man didn't pay Sunny a lot of attention and returned his gaze to the front rows of the crowd. Finally, he said in a deep, reverberating voice, "I am Awakened Rock. Sleepers, welcome to the Academy." Everyone listened without making a sound. In less than a month, you will be summoned to the dream realm. Some of you might think that you are well prepared. You're wronged. The spell is merciless and cunning. The moment awakened begin to think too much of themselves, they die. I've seen countless sleepers like you lose their lives. I've also seen experienced masters lose theirs. Even saints are not assured to survive. Thanks for the encouragement, Sunny thought sarcastically. In the following 4 weeks, we will do everything in our power to increase your chances of survival. You will receive training from the best instructors in the world. However, don't be misled by their fame. In the end, whether you return from the dream realm alive depends only on one person, you. The responsibility to survive is yours and yours alone. Except for the legacies, sleepers were looking at each other with growing fear in their eyes. Awakened Rock continued, "You are not children anymore. It's a shame because you ought to be. But the spell has decided otherwise. You have been to the first nightmare, so you already know what it's like. Your parents, your teachers, and your friends can't help you anymore. Haven't had any of those in a long time." While listening to Rock's speech, Sunny couldn't help but feel a little excluded. It was all old news to him. However, he understood the instructor's purpose. He had to make young sleepers afraid because fear was the only thing that would keep them alive. Finally, the speech got to the important part. Awakened Rock paused, giving kids listening to him a few moments to digest his words. Then, with a short nod, he continued, "Now we will talk about the difference between nightmares and the dream realms. Dreams and nightmares." 23. That was something Sunny was keenly interested in. Of course, he had a general knowledge of how things were set inside the spell, but the first nightmare had already shown him that reality was different from how it was portrayed in popular culture in a number of small but infinitely important ways. He needed to separate truth from the myths, and of course it was very advantageous to hear it from the mouth of someone who had actually been to the dream realm, so Sunny was all ears. Awakened Rock began to speak. Most people are aware of what nightmares are because they have an impact on the real world and their lives. All of you have been warned before entering the first nightmare that, should you perish there, a nightmare creature would be allowed to cross the threshold and enter reality. Yup, that was the reason why Master Jet had to wait patiently by his side, prepared to deal with the monster if it appears. First nightmares are unique because each of them is individual. That's why only a single creature can appear. However, starting from the second nightmare, things become much more dangerous. These nightmares are not tied to an infected person. Instead, they are born in the dream realm. While the seed of the nightmare is growing, any number of awakened can attempt to conquer it. Hunting down nightmares was the main responsibility of the awakened. Sunny knew that much. Should they all die or fail to find the seed before it matures, gate will open in the real world, letting through countless monsters. You all know the consequences. Other awakened will be forced to withstand the onslaught on this side, but then there can be massive destruction or losses among the civilian population. Opening gates were something that every person on the planet feared. It was also the second disaster brought upon by the spell after the initial appearance of the nightmare creatures. The main difference was that in that initial wave, there were only dormant beasts. However, gates had ranks of their own, and any type of creature could potentially step through. Not long before Sunny was born, a rank 5 gate opening left a whole continent uninhabitable. Luckily, high-rank gates were very rare. Awakened Rock's voice grew solemn. So, it is not wrong to say that the purpose of the awakened is to enter the dream realm, seek out maturing nightmares and close them before any harm could befall the real world. From this you can see that the dream realm and the nightmares are connected, but are not one and the same. If nightmares are the destination, then the dream realm is the road, but it is also so much more. Very romantic. Does Awakened Rock have poetic inclinations? Simply put, the dream realm is a world. It is vast, mysterious, and mostly unexplored. It is also dead. There is no life out there except for the nightmare creatures, corrupted ecosystems, and now us. But it wasn't always dead. We can tell that once, a long time ago, the dream realm was home to several primitive civilizations. There are a lot of ruins buried in its soil. From what Sunny knew, those lost civilizations were not really primitive. It's just that their development was centered around soul cores and mysticism as opposed to technology. So basically, miracles and magic. What were their names? How did they fall? No one knew. Maybe they were destroyed by the spell. We don't know if the dream realm exists inside the spell as one of its illusions, just on an unimaginably larger scale, or if it's real, with the spell only serving as a pathway between two realities. However, we do suspect that the illusions conjured up inside the nightmares are based on its history. They are replicas of past events, somehow reconstructed from the depths of time. So there might have been a real slave caravan on that black mountain once, a long time ago. Sunny remembered how time seemed to move in reverse at the beginning of his nightmare. He thought about how things would have ended up without his involvement. Did the nameless temple slave perish in Mountain King's Maw with the rest of the caravan? Somehow he felt that the nameless slave was not that simple. Otherwise, why would the spell remember him? And what about Hero? Was he able to escape? I wonder. There are 4 main differences between the dream realm and the nightmares. Firstly, it doesn't have a story. There is no predetermined conflict you are forced to resolve. You can move freely and explore, provided that you have the strength to stay alive in the wilderness. Most people tend to stay close to one of the human citadels. That's good to know, Sunny thought, unconvinced. Sure, there were no predetermined conflicts in the dream realm, but with his fated attribute, he was pretty certain to end up in some kind of trouble. So that freedom Awakened Rock had mentioned was relative in his case. Meanwhile, the instructor continued. Secondly, as I have already mentioned, there are no people in the dream realm except for those who came from the real world. There are only monsters. Some of them can mimic human appearance. Though so be mindful of that. Sunny felt cold sweat running down his back. Nightmare. Creatures mimicking humans. So creepy. Since when was that a thing? Why hasn't he ever heard about it? He stole a glance at the legacies standing in the first row and noticed that they did not show any sign of surprise, so they knew. Thirdly, unlike the first nightmare, no nightmare creatures will appear in the real world if you die in the dream realm. It may sound cruel, but that's a good thing. Awakened forces are already spread thin. If we had to monitor every sleeper, we wouldn't have resources to handle more important matters. Considering that each sleeper could spend weeks, sometimes, even months in the dream realm, there was ruthless logic in that statement. And lastly, and most importantly, unlike nightmares which are bound by the rules of fairness, there is no limit to what kind of creature you can meet in the dream realm. During its trials, the spell won't pit a dormant human against an opponent many ranks above them. Oh, really? Sunny sneered. However, he was forced to agree with Awakened Rock. Even though both Hero and Mountain King were way out of his league, they were still just one rank above him. But in the dream realm, no such restrictions exist. Theoretically, you can stumble upon an unholy titan and die before even realizing what happened. So be careful and stick to the regions. With enemies on par with your own rank, it's not an ironclad guarantee, but at least there will be less of a chance of you biting off more than you can chew, sticking to a region populated by nightmare creatures below. His rank was even better. That was exactly what Sunny was planning to do. Awakened Rock paused for a few moments, studying the faces of sleepers in front of him. Then he added, "When the solstice comes, you will be drawn into the dream realm. The exact location of where you will appear can't be predicted in advance, but there is a high chance that many of you will find yourselves in close proximity to each other. Band together and proceed to the nearest human citadel. Each citadel is built around a gateway. Once you reach it, you will be able to return. Gateways were special portals that served as exit points from the dream realm. Once sleepers reached such a portal, they would be able to escape back to reality and become awakened. Their core would evolve, and they would also receive a second aspect ability. After that, they would return to the dream realm each time they fall asleep. If you can't locate or are unable to reach the nearest human citadel, search for an unclaimed gateway. It will usually be inside or near the most prominent landmark of the region. Work together to defeat its guardians and come back alive." He gave them a heavy look. "That is all for today. Next, follow the instructions sent to your communicators to find your assigned dormitory. Once settled, you may proceed to the cafeteria for some late supper. There will be a round of interviews after that to prepare your suggested curriculums. Get a good night's rest. Your training starts tomorrow." With that, he gave them a short nod and left. Sunny sighed. Can't be predicted in advance, huh? With his luck, he would either drop right in the middle of a prosperous human citadel and immediately roll into a gateway, or appear in some region of the dream realm so remote and deadly that no one had ever heard about it or returned from it alive. Let's hope for the former. Since he couldn't do anything about it, Sunny wasn't very worried. There was something much more important on his mind. What exactly do they serve here for supper? Moving up in the world. 24. Everything having to do with sleepers was situated in the same building. Sunny followed the instructions sent to his communicator and quickly found the dormitories, which were situated on one of the lowest levels. To his surprise, he actually got a whole room to himself. It had a bed with a soft mattress, a table, a dresser, and even a separate bathroom. The materials were new and aesthetically pleasing. The air crisp and sterile. It was warm inside, and the outer wall was equipped with a hidden screen that seamlessly imitated a wide window opening to a picturesque vista of a snowy park. There were even several sets of clothes with the Academy emblem provided to him for free. How extravagant, Sunny thought, a little stunned. Rationally, he understood that such an arrangement was not really luxurious. However, to him, who grew up wandering the outskirts, this room was like a palace. He scratched his head. Looks like I've made it. Sunny glanced around, then winked at his shadow and smiled. I guess we're moving up in the world, huh? The shadow didn't respond, apparently not very impressed. Perhaps it didn't care about such things. Right, what would a stupid shadow know? Sunny changed into new clothes and studied himself in the mirror. Then, remembering something, he summoned the runes. He finally had time to study the Puppeteer's Shroud. Memory, Puppeteer's Shroud, memory rank awakened, memory type armor, memory description. A worm of doubt once found its way into a righteous king's heart. With time, the king was devoured from inside and became its puppet. A lifetime later, the puppeteer worm escaped from the king's dead body, leaving behind a cocoon of black silk. No one knows where it went, however. Once people dared to approach the silent castle, they found the silk among the mountains of gnawed bones and fashioned it into an armor. Sunny made a sour face. That is not that terrifying, yeah. I'm not creeped out at all. Come to think of it, the first creature he killed was called a larva, if he were to assume that Mountain King was a mature puppeteer worm and already a tyrant, then what the hell would it transform into after becoming a moth? No, it's better not to think about it. With a sigh, he summoned the puppeteer's shroud, thin black. Threads immediately appeared around his body and wrapped it into a set of armor. It was made of dark gray, soft fabric with several elements such as bracers and shoulder guards, fashioned out of black, lusterless leather. The armor was light, understated, and did not restrain his movements at all. It also made no sound when he moved. Perfect. Equipment for someone who likes to lurk in the shadows. Sonny smiled. He knew that this armor would be tough to pierce for any creature below the awakened rank, which gave him a great advantage in dealing with all dormant monsters. He also felt a sort of strange, faint calmness while wearing it. A worm of doubt, does it have enhanced protection against mental attacks? Somehow he was sure of it, a great trophy. He wouldn't expect anything less from the memory of a powerful tyrant. The only problem was that the puppeteer's shroud was obviously not meant to be worn on top of a full set of clothes. Quite satisfied, Sonny dismissed it and left his room, heading for the cafeteria. Not bad, he thought, recalling all the rewards he had received during and after the first nightmare. The supper turned out to be as lavish as the dormitory. Sonny's wish to taste real meat finally came true. Not only was it freely available to sleepers, but there wasn't even a limit to the amount each of them could eat. More than that, there was rice, bread, various side dishes, sauces, fresh vegetables, fruits, and all kinds of delicious beverages. Extravagant, Sonny thought, steering clear of the coffee. After building a small mountain of food on his plate, he found an empty seat and for a while forgot about the world's existence. As juicy, textured, perfectly seasoned meat filled his mouth, Sonny's vision suddenly was full of stars. He had to hold back an exhilarated moan, and to think he could have lived like that for a whole year. Damn spell, why didn't you infect me a few months ago? He concentrated on the food, decimating the whole plate in no time. Satiated and more than a little gorged, Sonny longingly looked back and thought about getting another serving, but it was already time for his appointment with the academy personnel. Full of regret, he stood up and left the cafeteria. Soon he found himself in a small office, sitting across from an administrative worker. The worker was very friendly and started the interview right away. Just like Master Jet had warned him, Sonny was offered psychological counseling again. Remembering her advice, he refused, and the interview smoothly switched to questions about his aspect. He didn't want to give up information about his abilities, but also knew that he had to tell the worker something. Luckily, the questions were worded in a way to put sleepers at ease. As such, most of them started with nice and polite preambles like, "Would you like to tell me, or if you're willing to share," which gave Sonny an opportunity to give neutral answers. "Would you mind telling me about the type of aspect ability you received as in combat, sorcery, utility?" He did mind but had to be careful. I'm not sure. I haven't had time to understand it well." "That's all right. Are you able to directly deal damage with your ability?" "I guess not. Earlier, I wasn't even able to harm a towel." Things went on like that. In the end, Sonny shared just enough information to create an impression that his aspect was weak, harmless, and most likely having something to do with utility. After that, he returned to his room undressed and went to sleep. Sonny thought that falling asleep for the first time after the nightmare would be weird, but in fact, it was surprisingly easy. Lying on a soft mattress, with his skin against clean bed sheets and a fluffy pillow under his head, he slept like a baby. Early in the morning, Sonny washed up in his private bathroom and, bursting with energy, hurried to get breakfast in a happy mood. The cafeteria was a bit crowded. After filling his plate with all kinds of delicious stuff, he quickly realized that the only place he could sit was near the blind girl from yesterday. Her table was empty. Since no one wanted to be close to her, Sonny grimaced. It seemed that the two of them were doomed to be outcasts together for the remaining 4 weeks. He also felt uncomfortable in the company of someone who was practically a dead person, but there wasn't much of a choice. Losing his good mood, he sat at the blind girl's table and gave a precursory nod to the social worker who was helping her get around. After that, he tried to pretend that they didn't exist and concentrated on his food. However, before he could finish, a sudden commotion drew his attention. "What's going on?" He looked up and noticed that a lot of sleepers were gathered Around the large screen hanging on the wall of the cafeteria, their faces, filled with excitement and awe. On the screen, a list of names was displayed, ranking the new batch of sleepers from weakest to strongest, most likely deduced from the results of the interviews. Not particularly interested, he quickly found his own name. Near the bottom of the list, the only sleeper who the Academy judged to be less likely to succeed than him was the blind girl. Turns out her name was Kasia, but the commotion was a bit too loud to be just the result of the ranking. Curious, he moved his gaze up. The sleepers were restless. How can this be? I'm not seeing things right. What kind of a monster is she? Castor was placed in second place, and right above him, the portrait of the silver-haired girl could be clearly seen. To the right of it, two simple lines of text were displayed. Name, Nephis. True name, Changing Star. Wilderness Survival. 25. So the silver-haired girl, Nephis, also received a true name in her first nightmare. To get his own, Sunny had to deal with Hero and Mountain King while possessing a completely useless aspect, an impossible feat that seemed to have pleased the spell very much. I wonder how she had gotten hers. Sleepers in the cafeteria were struck dumb by the revelation of this achievement. They were staring at the screen with astonishment, fear, and admiration. Listening to their excited whispers, Sunny felt a childish desire to scream, "Me too, I have one too." But of course he kept quiet. Looking around, he noticed Castor's gaze fixed on the screen. There was a strange, somber expression on the humorous young man's face, but the weird thing about it was that, as far as Sunny could tell, Castor wasn't looking at the line of text containing the true name. Instead, he was staring at the line of text that read Nephis, as though the girl's actual name held more meaning to him than the one given by the spell. Interesting, do they know each other? Why would a lofty legacy know someone who came to the Academy in a police-issued tracksuit? And speaking of Nephis, where was she? Sunny glanced around the cafeteria and quickly noticed the silver-haired girl who was sitting quietly in a corner with a cup of coffee in her hands. She wasn't paying a lot of attention to the commotion, seemingly immersed in her thoughts. Her gray eyes were serious and distant. A sleeper with a true name, that's impossible. It's technically possible. Smile of Heaven received her true name in the first nightmare, I think, but yeah, I'm doubtful. Maybe she lied in the interview. Are you stupid? If it was that easy to deceive the administrators, the crazy pervert from yesterday would have been in the first place instead. Sunny's face twitched. Crazy pervert, huh? Well, why don't we just ask her? Suddenly, there was a deafening silence in the cafeteria. Following the suggestion, sleepers stopped talking and turned around, staring at Nephis. However, no one seemed to have the courage to approach her first. Finally sensing something, she raised her eyes and looked at them with surprise. What? Even the blind girl, Kasia, turned in the direction of her voice. After a couple of moments, Castor suddenly walked over and made a small bow. Lady Nephis, I am Castor from the Hanley clan. I see that your trial went well. Lady, why is he addressing her that way? And he had to introduce himself, so they don't know each other. Interesting. Nephis seemed to be a little bit perplexed by the question. After thinking for a while, she smiled brightly and shrugged. It is what it is. Castor awkwardly returned the smile. I see. I am very glad that you returned unharmed. Not that I doubted your abilities. Nephis nodded. Thank you. After that, she returned to her coffee, indicating that the conversation was over or simply oblivious to everyone's attention. Sunny sighed. How mysterious. There were a lot of thoughts on his mind. However, none of them could distract him from the most important thing, breakfast. Few seconds later, he had forgotten all about the awkward dynamic between Castor and Nephis and was happily shoveling down his food. The wilderness survival classroom was spacious, tastefully decorated, and completely empty. Sunny even thought that he was mistaken, but then spotted a gloomy instructor sitting behind a wide wooden desk. Noticing him, the instructor perked up. Come in, young man. He was a lively old man with messy gray hair, absent-minded eyes, and a pair of bushy eyebrows that seemed to jump around on their own. I'm awakened Julius. You can call me Teacher Julius. Sit down, sit down. What's your name? Sunny obediently sat down. It's Sunless. Julius raised his eyebrows. Ah, what an ominous name, but that is good, very good. After all, we have to deal with a lot of ominous things. Sunny carefully looked around. I'm sorry, teacher, did I come too early? No, you're right on time. Are other students late? The instructor grunted with incredible contempt. No one else is coming, Those brutes are only interested in swinging their fists and swords around. Very few are smart like you and know the true value of knowledge. Oh, so it was that unpopular. Sonny inwardly sighed, hoping that he won't regret the decision to abandon combat training in favor of this course. Say, young man, why did you choose wilderness survival? Of all things, there was no point in hiding the true reason. Not that Sonny would have been able to anyway. The awakened that monitored me during the first nightmare. Master Jet had advised me to study it above all things. A very wise advice. That master truly knows what's important. Wait, did you say Jet? His eyes widened. Soul Reaper Jet, that murderous savage, who would have thought that a barbarian like her would know the value of intricate knowledge. Soul Reaper, Sonny's curiosity was piqued. Teacher, do you know Master Jet? Julius carefully looked behind his back before answering. Who doesn't know the Soul Reaper? She might not be the most powerful awakened out there, but she is certainly one of the most feared. That's because her aspect abilities disregard flesh and target soul cores directly, which means that no amount of armor, damage resistance, and physical protection can stop them. He leaned forward. The only good thing is that she's young and not likely to become a saint anytime soon or even ever. Yes, luckily there's a very low probability that she'll ever advance. Sonny blinked. Why? Julius looked at him as though trying to comprehend how someone could be so ignorant. Because of her problematic personality, of course. Who would want to help a psychopathic killer become a saint? You need a team of outstanding companions and a lot of support to attempt conquering the third nightmare. Soul Reaper Jet isn't. Wait. Suddenly Julius frowned and leaned back. Why am I gossiping with you? You're too young to know such things. More than that, it's not in my character to badmouth others behind their backs. I would beg to differ, Sonny thought sarcastically, but didn't say anything out loud. He already got a lot of juicy information out of Teacher Julius. Maybe choosing wilderness survival was the right choice. After all, let's get back to your curriculum. What other courses are you taking? Sonny sighed. None. For the next 4 weeks, I'll be fully concentrated on wilderness survival. Julius stared at him for a whole minute, an expression of utter astonishment written clearly on his face. Then slowly an excited gleam appeared in his eyes. Finally he grinned. Wonderful, this is wonderful. You're such an astute young man, don't you worry. In 4 whole weeks I will make you immortal. Sonny's lessons with Teacher Julius started pleasantly and without much tension, but just an hour later he felt like his head was ready to explode. There was so much new information, and all of it was so strange and counterintuitive for someone who had never left the walled-off, sheltered confines of the city. From time to time, Julius gaped at Sonny's lack of knowledge and relevant experience. However, he had a good attitude and an endless enthusiasm for teaching. Whenever Sonny stumbled, he would patiently slow down and allow his student to catch up. The curriculum that Julius planned out was practically insane. There was an endless amount of theoretical knowledge to learn, practical lessons both in virtual reality and the real world, numerous subjects and weird things to study. There were even several lessons dedicated exclusively to learning the basics of several dead languages. Of the dream realm, why would I need to learn new languages? Sonny thought. With self-pity, the spell automatically translates everything. But Julius was uncompromising. The spell is not a translator. Do you think it has the time to express the intricacies of human speech? Let's say you're seeking shelter in a ruin and find an inscription that reads certain death. Ahead, there are 30 words for death in the rune language. Just by knowing the runes, you'll be able to deduce what kind of danger there is. On the first day, they studied until the sun was about to set. Only then did Julius decide to let Sonny go. Mentally exhausted and lamenting the fact that he had to miss lunch and dinner, Sonny decided to gently remind his teacher about the importance of food for maintaining high levels of concentration tomorrow. After returning to his room, he fell on a chair and stared blankly into the distance for a while. Then, as though remembering something, Sonny turned to his shadow. Right, he had a lot to accomplish before supper. He observed the shadow for a few seconds and then grinned. Let's see what you can really do.